Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host Matt Filipovitz. Matt, what's going on?
Bill, I was excited that this weekend I got to see you first and foremost in Indianapolis in I forget where we even were. Was it a Marriott? We were at the JW Marriott, not a sponsor, but they could be, in the bar inside the hotel. It was a great time in Indy, a very fun city. Bill, the layout, it's a city that was clearly built, or at least a downtown area, to host conventions and to host the Big Ten title game. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, did you make your way over to the stadium through like the series of connected bridges that mean you never have to go outside, or?
No, I wandered around outside for a while because it was a pretty nice day out. Like, it wasn't too
Okay.
cold, so I wandered around.
Yeah.
I did see the Pacers campaign, which is like, yes, sirs. I think that is a very smart ad campaign by the Indiana Pacers. So I was very amused by how much of Pascal Siakam's face I saw throughout my walk.
Yeah, and we were also amused, of course, by one hell of a football game in the Big Ten championship game. Penn State, obviously, if you're listening to this, came up a little bit short on Saturday, fell against the Oregon Ducks 45-37. Oregon will end up being the champions of the Big Ten in their first year in the conference. It was a monster football game, but Penn State, the more pessimistic fan will say, once again, couldn't win the big one. The more optimistic fan will probably say that this was a good game, and they showed that they were able to battle back from some adversity. As a result, the Nittany Lions fell down to number 4 in the most recent college football playoff rankings and are the 6th seed in the college football playoff. They will host SMU in an on-campus game on December 21st. And Matt, before we get to talking about the Oregon game, before we get to talking about the our preliminary thoughts on SMU and the playoff and how the SEC has debased themselves over the last however many days, just generally, how are you feeling after what has been a really, really hectic 48 hours in Penn State fans?
It's been a whirlwind. I didn't think Penn State would win, but to see them have a shot late was nice to see. Like, I thought Penn State would keep it very close, and to see them only lose by 1 score, I was pleased with the performance over. Obviously, I want to win, but Bill, it felt new. Like, and I'm always looking for new things in college football. That I think that's what keeps it so exciting. I can't name the last time I feel like the blame for a Penn State loss belongs on the defense. I feel like it's been a long, long time since I could say that. The Penn State offense showed me something. They showed me a gear I didn't think they had. The offensive line pushed dudes around. There was 1 sack in that game allowed by Penn State, and it came on a play that Bo Pribula came in on. Like, I could not be...
It's worth saying, came in on out of necessity.
Correct.
Because Drew Aller was banged
Correct.
up.
Bill, I cannot... And Josh Pate on the Late Kick Josh College Football Podcast, whatever his show is called, I apologize, Josh. He made a comment, and I don't really listen to too many other podcasts, except for like Penn State-focused ones, but he made a comment that he feels better about Penn State's odds to make a run after watching them lose a game where they put up 37 points, as opposed to win a game where they would have won like 13-9. And I agree with that statement. Like, what Penn State showed me is that the offense has a gear that we have not seen all year. Obviously, the defense has a lot to figure out, but I trust that the defense can figure it out. I don't think I could have trusted the offense could, quote unquote, figure it out before what happened on Saturday night. But man, if they play like that again, there's not too many teams I don't think Penn State can take down.
It's an interesting game because I left. So to let everybody know what my plans were on Saturday, if Penn State won the game, I went to Indianapolis with a friend of mine from around here who I know is going to end up listening to this podcast. And our plan was to drive out there, and if Penn State won, He had permission from his wife, and I had permission from my girlfriend to just be total assholes after. And we had plans for what we were going to do, and I was going to Venmo one of my various friends who were in town to say, like, I know you have a hotel room. Here's $100. Let me sleep on your floor. That didn't happen. So instead, we did an equally fun thing, which was get in the car and drive from Indianapolis to Columbus, which is about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. And we got home at 3 a.m. So as you can guess, there was a lot of trying to talk through and think about this game. One, because it just happened and we had a lot of time to kill. Two, because if my brain wasn't like working overtime, I was going to fall asleep and I wouldn't be doing this podcast right now. And I was trying to think of why, despite the fact that Penn State lost a game that was right there for them to win. And that, like,
dude, if that Dylan Gabriel fumble bounces like 6 inches to the left, Abdul falls on it, I think Penn State wins that ball game. Like, there's a lot of ifs, but like that is one specific play that, like, I just think if Penn State had back, and to no fault of their own, like, ball bounces, it's a weird ball. It bounces weird ways. I think that's a play that could have redefined the James Franklin era.
Yeah, and I think if this game ends something like 27-17 Oregon, I think I predicted 31-21 Oregon. So that would have meant that Penn State lost a game where it slowed down maybe the best offense in the country, and while slowing down maybe the best offense in the country, it just didn't, it was only able to beat Oregon's defense twice. And if they lost a game like that, I don't think I would have been feeling as good. No. And what I've been thinking about in the days since this game is that, okay, what do I trust will happen going forward? And the one thing that I trust, and I'm always going to be comfortable putting my trust in, is Penn State's defense. And it's Penn State's defense having a bad day, but being able to fix and correct itself, in large part because the only team they are going to play that is on Oregon's level, if they make a run to the college football playoff championship game, would be Oregon in the championship game. And when we'll talk about SMU in a second, but they have an unbelievable offense. Some reasons I'm a little bit concerned about that game, but we'll get to that later. And for Penn State to lose a game where they had 523 yards of total offense, where they ran for nearly 300 yards and 8.7 yards per rush, like, we saw the idea behind hiring Andy Kotelnicki, which was that he would be able to say, I got Katron Allen, I got Nick Singleton, I'm going to go out there and run the damn football down the opposing team's throats. And he did it against an elite defense. And they did something that I have been waiting for them to see all season long, Matt. I've been waiting for them to go out and put on a show and impose their will on offense. And they did it against, other than Ohio State, the best defense that they have played this entire season. So as I am thinking about going forward for Penn State, yes, obviously I am not happy with the fact that they lost this game. I'm really proud of the fact that they were down 28-0, and it got to 28-0 after the exact sort of thing that not just Penn State, any team would fold after. Drew Aller throws his first pick of the game. They get it down to the 1 yard line. They punch in after one play. It is 28-10. It would have been simple for Penn State to fold after that. And they did not do that in the slightest. So if they can show that resiliency, if their defense can shore some things up against offenses that are not as good as Oregon's, if the offense can even give them 80% of what they got on Saturday, I think Penn State is in a position right now, as we are entering the college football playoff, even separate from the draw that they have, to be able to make some noise in the race for a national championship.
Oh, 100%. I don't know how you can come away from that game not having like a new outlook on the ceiling of the Penn State offense, considering what Nick Singleton and what Katron Allen gave you. Bill, we'll rattle it off. Katron Allen, 14 carries for 124 yards, almost 9 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. It felt like every time he got the football, Bill, he was getting at least 7 yards. Like, I know you and I were both there in person. there were certain plays where I got to see the one where he kind of gets bottled up and he bounces it outside and runs for like 20 something odd yards, I want to say. I got to watch that in real time, and to watch his vision like was just really cool to see, because you could see everybody kind of congealing around Katron, and for him to be able to get out of it was really impressive. Nick Singleton, 10 carries, 105 yards. He also had a receiving touchdown on a really well-designed play. Like Singleton one-on-one against a linebacker, no safety over the top. Drew floated in there. Great play. And then Aller, 5 carries for 54 yards, 10.8 yards per attempt, and 1 touchdown. That read he had on his touchdown run, he kept that ball until the last second possible, and that is a hell of a job to get into the end zone.
And they got Oregon with that exact play, a couple other times over the course of the game, where it's that like midline read option where Drew is reading the defensive end, and it's either Singleton gashing them to the outside or a hole opens up in the middle of the offensive line, and Drew just takes off. And he got a couple of big chunk plays out of that. There's been a lot of, Andy Kotelnicki has had to tailor his offense around Drew Aller. Drew Aller is not the right quarterback or the best possible quarterback for Andy Kotelnicki's offense. Drew Aller's averaging about 4 yards a carry so far this season, and looked really I think whenever he has had to use his legs this season, has looked really, really comfortable taking off, taking what he can get, and then diving forward to gain that final extra yard. Like I almost feel like that a lot of the concern about Drew's ability to run the ball and how he fits in Andy Kotelnicki's offense, I've always thought it was a bit overstated, but I think this was one of those games that made you go, oh, wait, if they could do this consistently, they have something really dangerous.
Look,
here.
Anybody who says Drew's a statue or Drew can't run doesn't watch the games. It's a lazy take. Like, that is what it is. Anybody, if you can watch how Drew Aller escapes pressure, what he's able to do when he decides to tuck it and run, what he's able to do on that last play to Trey Wallace, where he fights through contact and gets the ball off, that is not a statue. That's an athlete. Maybe not the best, but it's disrespectful to call him a statue. Bill, Amari caught a touchdown pass. Trey caught a touchdown. Like, it's the first game of the year, I want to say, where 2 different wide receivers have caught touchdown passes. Tyler Warren was his usual self. Like, there are pieces here that are coming together. And I think Franklin said it best in his post-game presser. It's a whole new season now. And if this is a whole new season, and if that's the Penn State offense we get for this whole new season, dude, watch out. Like, this could be, again, it all could come crashing down in one game, and I really hope it doesn't. But Agreed. I really do think that this was a big step taken by this team. And I want to make sure I talk about a lot of guys, and I want to make sure I talk about Drew and Nick and Katron. But like, I think
you got to go ahead and talk offensive line.
I started and ended it, but I got to end it here, dude. Like, the offensive line: Drew Shelton, Veguane, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, Nolan Rucci. They deserve a standing ovation from everybody who was in that crowd. That's an Oregon defensive line that is aggressive, that is disruptive, that is well coached. And not only did they hold their own, Bill, the Penn State offensive line kind of kicked ass for a large portion of that game.
Yeah.
And that is not something I expected to see. Nolan Rucci was outstanding.
Nolan Rucci looked like a 5-star.
He looked like a 5-star in that game, dude. I just think there is so much you can build upon from this. It's not teach tape, but this is proof of concept tape. This is something you put on to show all of the guys in that offensive line room. There is not a defensive line in the country that can stop you when you play at that level. And that, I think, has me most excited. I knew Drew was going to be able to make some big throws. I knew Tyler Warren can do his thing. I knew once they're healthy, those running backs are going to hit, a next level. But to watch 2 receivers catch touchdown passes and to watch an offensive line kick the shit out of one of the top defensive lines in the country for 3 quarters, basically, I really think that this offense is about to take another big step.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It was a thing we said on the preview pod, Matt. So this isn't us retroactively hyping Oregon's defense up, but their defensive line is, I think it's the best in the country, and if it's not, it's number 2 to Ohio State. And to see the way that Penn State was able to dominate them, the way that Penn State was able to just open up space for the running backs and for Drew. Drew Aller's longest run of the day was 22 yards. That was longer than Bo Pribula's longest run of the day, which was 18 yards. Like,
That bow run was sick
there
too. I
was
thought he
just,
got in
yeah,
watching live.
yeah.
I couldn't tell if his knee
Mhm.
or if like the ball actually crossed. The bow package was used very well. Like, let's take out the sack because that's not a bow package play. That's like an injury to Aller hate to come in kind of play. But I thought the bow played a lot in this game, and I thought they used him as a decoy very well. And then when he got the ball in his hands, I liked what he was able to do.
Yeah, and from basically the top to the, other than the fact that I didn't think Aller had his best game throwing the ball by any
No.
stretch of the imagination. I thought he was a little bit hurried. I thought he wasn't totally comfortable.
That Warren ball down the
I
seam is the
thought-
best example of that, where they lined up in an
Yeah.
odd formation, and they had Warren right down the
Yeah.
seam, and Aller, I think his eyes got really big, and he just zipped it in there way too quick.
Yeah, and it was, in a way, I think this game shows a bit of the evolution of Drew Aller, where, you know, he threw for 5.8 yards per attempt, 226 yards of total offense. He was still able to throw for 3 touchdowns, had a pretty good QBR. His QBR was QBR of 81.8, but we also saw that he is still not a finished product. I think that as he continues to get older and dropped into big games, and he will almost certainly continue to get dropped into big games over the course of his Penn State career, I think this is kind of like the floor for what we should expect for him. I mean, you look back at the Ohio State game earlier this year, 12 for 20, 146 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. That's not a very good game for him. You look back at Ole Miss last year, 19 for 39, 295 yards, threw for a lot of yards, but 2 touchdowns and a pick, completion of 48.7. His long of the game was Tyler Warren doing something absolutely miraculous. Michigan last year, 10 for 22, 70 yards, 45.5% completion, 1 touchdown, no picks. Ohio State last year, 18 for 42, 191 yards, 42.9% completion, 1 touchdown. The floor for what a bad Drew Aller game is getting raised.
Yep.
And that's a really encouraging thing for him going forward. But for the most part, other than the fact that, you know, he's still at the point, you know, we can forget how young he is. He's still at the point where he is realizing that experience is the best teacher. Like, he will be a better quarterback down the road for this game because of this game, because of the way he struggled in this game. But even in a game where he struggled, he accounted for 4 touchdowns. You know, he puts that ball on Warren and it's another touchdown.
And ties the game up at 31.
Yeah, ties the game up at 31. So a lot to really be encouraged with this Penn State performance. We're going to talk about Penn State's defense here in a second. And we're also going to talk a little bit about SMU and some playoff thoughts and a couple other things. But first, I want to make it a point to shout out our podcast sponsor, Home Field Apparel. Matt, I know you were wearing some home field gear in Indianapolis, as I was.
I did.
Well.
Bill, I got to meet Connor, head of and founder at Home
here.
Field. I got to meet him actually by happenstance. I was walking into the game and I made a left and I saw some guy who looked like Connor out of the corner of my eye. And I'm just going to ask if he's Connor. And then I introduced myself and we chatted for a little bit. And then he showed me a text he sent you. And that was my interaction with Connor. Very, very nice guy.
Yeah.
I thanked him for sponsoring the podcast and told him how much I like his stuff. Shout out to Connor.
Yeah, he's a gem. I watched most of the second quarter on the concourse with him, and he's a great dude. And Home Field, of course, is a great company and a great sponsor for our podcast. I know they had me, they had you, they had so many people fitted out with what they were wearing in Indianapolis. I wore the blue Penn State bomber jacket. I must have seen 20 of those just walking around Indianapolis and walking around at the game. I saw the blue bomber jacket, the white bomber jacket. You were wearing the coach's jacket.
I didn't realize you hadn't seen the coach's jacket before, Bill. When I walked up, and
not in person yet.
Yeah,
no.
it's nice, right?
No.
I like it a lot.
It's beautiful. And a bunch of different t-shirts, a bunch of different hoodies, anything that a Penn State fan could want. Home Field Apparel saw it at the Big Ten championship game. And I am sure if you go to any of Penn State's playoff games, hopefully playoff games and not playoff game, you will see people wearing stuff from Home Field Apparel as well. If you want to make it a point to get some Home Field Apparel in your collection, you've never purchased anything from them before, use the promo code RLR24 to get 15% off of your first order. Again, use the promo code RLR24 PennState24 to get 15% off of your first order. Thank you as always to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this podcast. Best of luck to your beloved Hoosiers as they take on Notre Dame in the first round of the playoff in a game that I think there are going to be some fights in the stands of that game, but we'll save that for a little bit later because we are moving on to talking about Penn State's defense. And
Yikes.
It was a weird game for Penn State's defense.
Bad game.
I think the thing with Penn State's defense is that I still think they're a really, really great unit. And I go back to something, I think I mentioned it on this podcast, and but I mentioned it to some friends quite a while ago, Matt, which is that in years past, Penn State would get into games against the big boys, and their 10 out of 10 defense would take it to them, and their 6 out of 10 offense would just not be able to do anything in a game of that caliber. This year, Penn State's 8 out of 10 defense would normally be able to take care of business, but they would have an 8 out of 10 offense that would be able to put some points up. And both of those come out to about a 16 out of 20, but one feels a lot different than the other. And I think we saw the way that could be a negative here, because while Penn State's defense is really good, while Penn State's defense has a bunch of really talented players, Oregon showed what has kind of always been my fear with them, particularly at the second level of their defense. I just don't know if they have the athletes to keep up with a team as fast and athletic as Oregon. They did a generally okay job against Oregon's dynamic running game, but Tez Johnson in particular, and with how Dylan Gabriel was dealing, there was just so much for Penn State to be able to overcome in this one.
A couple of things. Dylan Gabriel and Tez Johnson were phenomenal. Lights out. Tez Johnson is special. Watching him live was a treat. Like, objectively, that dude can play.
Yeah. I'm not the first Penn State person to say this. He reminded me of KJ Hamler, only if KJ was like more explosive somehow. He was
that good. Tez looked unbelievable. I'm not going to complain about the refs because I think that's loser energy, but I think Oregon's offensive line got away with an awful lot of holding, which is fine. Like, listen, they don't call it, it's not holding. I'm not going to complain about it, but I think that's important.
And this was and Penn State fans had mentioned that I forget who pointed this out, but the head referee was the official for the Penn State Ohio State game, where again the referees really wanted to make sure they just let the guys play, and they did that in a big way this time.
With all that being said, how do I want to word this? Out of respect to the Penn State defense, they were bad. They were awful. 45 points is too many points to allow in your biggest game of the year. And I don't want to come across as too critical on college kids because I've really babied the offense a lot of the time. The defense has this standard where I think it would belittle them to baby them. The defense was not good enough, frankly. It was not a well-called game. I get it. It was a poorly officiated game. But with all that being said, the Penn State defense has a standard to uphold. They did not uphold it. 45 points is way too many. To their credit, on that final drive before the Aller final interception that pretty much ended the game, they clamped down and they got off the field quickly and efficiently, and that's something I want to celebrate. But with all that being said, it would be disrespectful, I think, to the Penn State defense and the standard of that room to say anything less than they were bad in this game, and they need to correct it and be better because the SMU offense is no joke, and they need to be ready for it.
Yeah, and what I will say is 7 of those points did come when the offense put them in an impossible
spot. On like the -2 yard line. They were basically in the end zone. Yeah.
Yeah. They were on the 1 yard line. They had to get 1 yard. To whatever extent you can show a little mercy to Penn State's defense. I think that's it.
Agreed.
It was
Bill, we have a tweet. Can I read something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you see it?
No, I didn't.
From Andy Kotelnicki, Bill, on Twitter. There's been rumors flying around, so I'm going to get your live reaction. Beyond lucky,
I know exactly what this is going
to be a part of the Penn State football family. Still a lot to accomplish this season, and I'm looking forward to what 2025 has in store for our program. #WeAre.
Let's go. Andy Kotelnicki, as you know, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you know this. Kotelnicki was considered one of the favorites to get the job at WVU after Neil Brown. that basically confirms it. He's going to be sticking around at Penn State for another year. We'll talk about that in a
Sorry,
little.
I just saw it come
you're on a
up,
bit
and
of a
I'm
time
like,
crunch.
oh,
We have a
you're
lot
going
of
to
stuff.
win it.
No, I totally understand. I totally understand. There's a Manchester City podcast that I listen to that always talks about players in the what is it? The Gordon Ramsay meme, where there's always the one where
Oh yeah, an
it's the
idiot
person that you're
sandwich,
mad
or
at.
yeah, I know what you're talking
The
about.
idiot, there's the idiot sandwich, or the oh dear, come here, but where it's like a kitchen nightmares for one and MasterChef for the or MasterChef kids for the or whatever it is. And I think this is kind of one of those situations where for the year we've treated Penn State's offense like the oh poor you, come here, blah 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 blah, and Penn State's defense is now getting the idiot sandwich treatment, which is a bit unfair to them. I mean, they've been so good for so long, and Oregon is a uniquely tricky team. The way that Oregon spreads you out horizontally. This is a thing that like blew me away. A lot of football teams don't necessarily like to use all 53.3 yards that you have from one sideline to the next. And Oregon is a team that likes to do that, which puts you in a lot of space, makes you defend a lot of space, puts you in conflict very easily, makes it so a guy like Tez Johnson specifically can really take it to you. And I think Penn State, the fact that they don't really have a guy or two guys who can keep up with someone like that, they have a bunch of really great players on their defense regardless, but that in particular was a big problem for them. It also didn't help, the number of times when I was like getting out of my chair ready to scream because Dylan Gabriel's shoulder was here and Abdul Carter's hand was here, and Gabriel just gets it out, a fraction of a second before Abdul Carter could, envelop him. That had to have happened 10 times.
At least it felt like it, dude.
Yeah.
And to
that's one of
Gabriel's
those
credit,
things,
dude, that dude navigates the pocket at a different level. Like you can tell he's been in college for a long time because he is not flustered at all.
Yeah, and it's the thing that I come back to with Drew, where like that experience is the best teacher. That is something that playing it is a lot of games like this, and Gabriel's played in, I think he's played in like more games than anyone to play quarterback or something like that. That's something that will come, I think. But having said that, Penn State's offense still held Oregon to, give me 1 second. Let me make sure I have this pulled up. 469 yards, which doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, which sounds like a lot, but for Oregon's offense, they can do that on anyone. They held Oregon's passing attack to 8.8 yards per attempt. They held Oregon's yard per rush to 4.5 yards per rush. They held Oregon to 6 for 13 on third down. Going back to when Oregon played Ohio State in Eugene, Ohio State held Oregon 6 for 14 on third down, 496 yards of total offense, 10 yards per attempt in their passing game, and 5 yards per rush. So a lot of the underlying numbers in this one, both Penn State and Ohio State turned the ball over 2 times. So like a lot of the underlying numbers in this one indicate that Penn State's defense, didn't acquit itself super well, did not have an especially great game, but still was able to battle against one of the best defenses in the country. Again, not good enough. They have to get better. They have to use these next 2 weeks ahead of the game against SMU to get better. But for the most part, I'm not super stunned by what Oregon's offense had. A little more points than I would have liked for sure, but I'm not super stunned by what Oregon's offense did, Matt. What I will say is that the stuff that Penn State did to make its life more difficult, multiple face masks in the first quarter, I think one of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties they got hit with was on the defense.
There was one on kickoff on a dead ball, which I didn't see happen live.
Yes.
So, and they didn't show.
Neither did I.
One comment to the Lucas Oil Stadium folks. First of all, phenomenal stadium. Really impressed by how nice that was. Show more replays, please, so I can see.
Show more replays of stuff that makes me unhappy
Yes.
that aren't Oregon touchdowns, because they I don't think they showed any of those. But yeah, there were two face masks. There was the unnecessary roughness on the kickoff, and then there was an offensive unnecessary roughness
Vega,
by
yeah.
by Vega. But Penn State did so much shooting itself in the foot, and Oregon got basically every bounce in this game, Matt. There was those penalties. There was that fumble that you mentioned, where Dylan Gabriel drops it in front of him and he's somehow the one to fall on it. And yet, in spite of all of that, Parker Fleming put out his "Did we really get beat that bad?" metric, where he measures games by how success rate, the stat success rate kind of determines who should have won. And by his net success rate metric, Penn State should have won this game. And I keep coming back to the fact that a lot of Penn State's problems were things that they can, should, and I think will clean up. And if they are able to do that and pair that with a version of this offensive performance, they have the potential to do some really special things over the next month or so.
100%. And it sucks, Bill, because like
Mhm.
should have won. Should have won. Penn State should have won that game because it changes so many narratives. Um, it just sucked. Like that last little bit, like I really thought Penn State. First of all, I love the 2-point conversion call. We haven't talked about it yet. You couldn't stop them.
I have two things that I have two
Yeah.
things we're going to talk about, and that.
All right, you want to take it?
No. Go ahead. Say whatever you want.
Penn State played to win the game, and they frankly came up short. And I get the Franklin, versus top 5 team stats, blah blah blah. And it sucks that I can't take a moral victory away from Penn State. Probably should have won this game, but again, I think that it's. I'm happy with how things turned out in terms of that. I think Penn State gave its best shot and the ball just didn't bounce their way. And I don't think you can say that in all of the losses Penn State has taken to top 10 teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I'm taking solace, at least.
Yeah. The line, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Like, the opportunities were there mostly for Oregon. And that actually leads to, like you mentioned, Matt, the decision to go for 2
Great
points,
call.
where Penn State, we'll talk about it here in a second, but Penn State, let's see, it is after they score a touchdown. Katron Allen runs it in for 1 yard, 14-17 left in the fourth quarter to make it 38-30. James Franco decides to go for 2. 2-point conversion ends up failing. Whatever. You were a fan of the call. Why were you a fan of the call?
Because you couldn't stop.
Whoa. Let me backtrack this. What were your thoughts on the play call, and separately, what were your thoughts on the decision to go?
Listen, I have my scars from the Penn State Ohio State game in 2023, where Penn State scored a touchdown, and the 2-point conversion was let Keandre Lambert Smith throw. So it is kind of like cruel irony that this kind of 2-point conversion that failed again was quarterback doesn't throw the football, someone else does or tries to. I think the Philly special was I get it. You're trying to catch him off guard. You're running for at that point, 5 yards of carry, though. I'd rather you just put your head down and go get it. But I think there are scars there from that Ohio State game. I get it. You're still figuring yourself out. In terms of why I like going for it, James Franklin needs to play to win games more often in games like this. That is playing to win the game. You could not stop Oregon for 90% of the night. If you get into overtime, you are not winning a shootout against those guys. I hate to say it. With how the defense was playing, that was the case. If you have a shot to score points, you take that shot. I like that they took the shot. It didn't play out in Penn State's favor. They still had a shot to win the game. Driving down the field with 2 minutes to go, turnover happens. It is what it is. Good call. Not a scared call. I'm happy Penn State went for 2.
That makes 2 of us. One is that basically there's been a lot of math and research done on this. And that math and research indicates that if you score a touchdown to make a 14-point game a 7-point game, to potentially make a 14-point game a 7-point game late in the game, you should go for 2, because you are expected to convert about 50% of your fourth down.
2-point conversions.
Not your fourth down, your 2-point conversions. If you convert the earlier one, that puts you in a position where just a touchdown and a PAT makes it so you win the game. If you do not convert it, then you are statistically likely to convert that second fourth down attempt. That's fine. My bigger thing, I also didn't love the play call. I think, you also have to take your cap to Oregon. They saw it was Philly from the jump. They did a really good job of stiffing it out and making sure that Tyler Warren just had nowhere to go with the football. But for me, the bigger thing was you mentioned how Penn State needed to try and win the game. And, big picture stuff, Franklin, blah, blah, blah. I think Penn State needed something to go their way. They needed some sort of edge over Oregon because Oregon had already gotten 7 points off of a Penn State interception, and Penn State had shown it started to get a couple of stops, after Oregon's drives after that 1 yard touchdown were a 3 and out, 10 plays, 61 yards for a field goal, a touchdown, a punt, and then the drive where Penn State went for 2 and didn't get it. Penn State was starting to find its footing in that game. And I loved the thought from James Franklin of we need to do something that gives us this little bit of an extra edge on the score sheet and makes it so, yeah, they can score again if they want to, or they could potentially score again, but we need to be in a position where if we score again, we can potentially take the lead and put ourselves in position to win this
end the game on their terms.
So end the game on your own terms. It was the thought process behind this and the thought process behind the final whatever against Minnesota were the exact same thought process. Exact same thought process that Penn State has to win the game, has to be able to take this game from them. The difference is it worked there. It didn't work here. It's unfortunate, but I love that from James Franklin. I love that from Penn State's offense, giving yourselves just that little extra something to puff your chest out of it. And it's not like them failing to convert that was like this critical blow to the offense because their very next drive, 13 plays, 75 yards.
3 plays later, the Gabriel fumble happens. Like it was right after that. Like Penn State had all the it was just unbelievable. What a game! I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun watching this game.
It was a blast. What were your thoughts on the pick? Were you a fan of Penn State chucking it deep in that situation?
I think that's Aller's call. I don't think that's so much the Penn State play call. Like a guy runs deep all the time for Penn State to kind of clear out space. I thought it was a poor read by Aller. I just don't think he saw the safety. Dinkins was open in the flat for a dump off. I would have liked to see them run it there. But again, like I don't have a lot of confidence in the Penn State receivers. I'm starting to get a little bit more, but if the team has confidence in those receivers to go out there and make a play, I respect it. I would have ran the football personally. But I do wonder if some of that was, hey, you're Penn State. You gave up you gave up a timeout coming out of a dead ball. I think on an incomplete pass. The 2-minute warning was behind you. Maybe you kind of want to score quickly in the event you don't get it. You can get off the field and get one more shot at it. So I think there's a lot of elements there. But personally, I would have run the football in that specific example.
Yeah, my thing is second and 1 from midfield is the most obvious take a shot play in all of college football. I was fine with them doing it. The one thing I wasn't fine with them doing was I thought that Penn State was in that really tricky spot where you don't want to give Oregon the ball with too much time left. But they were also down by 8, so they kind of need, just a lot went into that. I was totally fine with Drew throwing it up there and telling Trey to go make a play. Might have been a little bit of defensive holding that went uncalled. And by saying might have, I mean there was defensive holding that went uncalled because they didn't call anything in this goddamn game. Or what was Oregon hit with? 3 penalties for 24 yards and not a single a very much let the boys play game by the refs. But I think the part that gets kind of lost in all of it is that Nico Reed also made an incredible play to bring that football in. And I think that, that doesn't make it better. It doesn't make the fact that he threw that pick better, but it also sometimes you got to tip your hat to how good the other team is. And I don't know about you, Matt. I think Oregon's winning a national title. I think that's the best football team I've seen all season.
Agreed. I think they're that good.
Yeah. You also just spoiled your our playoff pick'em bracket result for me. So now I have to consider if I'm going to change mine.
I already filled mine out.
No, so did I. Yeah, we'll do that another time. But Penn State, while Penn State lost this game, it isn't all lost. The Nittany Lions fell to number 4 in the playoff. A very funny thing is that if this was a 4-team playoff, Penn State would be in it. Or likely would be in it. I don't know how they
I think they
actually
would
would
have
have
in
dealt
this
with
with the other two loss or the other conference champions not being all that great. I think Penn State would have gotten in with an at-large here.
Yeah.
So window confirmed.
I don't know how I don't know how they would have dealt with Texas. I don't in this situation. I don't know how they would have dealt with Notre Dame in this situation.
Yeah.
Whatever, all this stuff. But Penn State, number 4 in the final college football playoff rankings. Number 6 in the bracket is going to be playing SMU. Got the college football playoff bracket pulled up right here. The Friday game is going to be that Indiana Notre Dame game that we mentioned. Should be one hell of a football game. And then on Saturday, the 21st, that was on Friday the 20th. On Saturday the 21st, Penn State SMU at noon.
On TNT, Charles Barkley. Let's go to a tailgate.
TNT. No,
I know it's not Chuck.
unfortunately,
I
that's
know,
not
I
how
know,
it's
I
going to
know.
work. Unfortunately, 4 p.m. Clemson, Texas, and then 8 p.m. Ohio State, Tennessee. We can talk about those other games in a second. But Matt, just what are your preliminary thoughts on SMU? There's been a lot of talk about how easy Penn State's path is, and I kind of categorically disagree with that. But what are your thoughts on the path in front of Penn State, where if they are able to beat SMU, they would then play Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, probably the most terrifying place to play Boise State. And what are just your general thoughts on Penn State's matchup as we enter this part of the season?
All risk, all reward. All risk, all reward, baby. That's what the playoff is all about. Penn State, if they lose to SMU or to Boise State, James Franklin will never hear the end of it. Penn State fans will never hear the end of it. Social media will be insufferable. That's why I highly recommend you get off social media. They got to win these two. They got to win these two. If you are going to go, and I get it, I get why, but if you are going to be the coach and the team that goes like 1-12 against top 10 teams, you got to beat up on the teams in your bracket who you should beat up on. SMU is a really good football team. You don't accidentally win 11 games. That offense can play. That defense is pretty good. Like, they gave Clemson hell for 60 minutes, 60 plus minutes, went into overtime. And I think Clemson's
Clemson raced out to a really big lead, and then SMU, in the thing that is scary about them, was able to make that really big lead go away.
It's all risk, it's all reward. You can win a playoff game. You can have James Franklin win multiple playoff games. But to get there, they have to not stumble against teams that, frankly, don't have as talented players. And, like, that's not disrespect to SMU and Boise State. That's just, like, recruiting rankings. And I'm not the kind of guy who's, going to crown a champion based on recruiting rankings. But Penn State needs to win these two games. They just, frankly, they need to figure out a way to get wins here. If you have a chance to go to the game, if you are able to against SMU, I'm going, you should go. Go, be loud. Again, we have 2 weeks before this game even happens, but I'm so excited about it. Pack Beaver Stadium. Let's have a great time. We can tailgate, go build a playlist that features Christmas music because it's going to be cold and ridiculous. Like, I could not be more excited to play this game. I think SMU is a hell of an opponent, and I'm dying to know how Penn State's going to prep to stop that offense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My preliminary thoughts on this one, or my preliminary thoughts on all this is that, like, I've seen a lot of people, Joel Klatt, washing off the hair gel on his hands and going onto Twitter and firing off takes about how easy Penn State's path is. And, like, I just, like, fundamentally disagree that, one, there is any such thing as an easy path right now.
Hold on, Bill. Joe Klatt said that the easiest game, so hypothetically the worst game, is being played at noon.
Yeah.
Why would he say that? Noon is the prime time
his
spot.
his entire thing was that Penn State lost and got a more favorable path than Oregon, who won the Big Ten, got the auto bye, but has to play one of Ohio State or Tennessee. And, like, I think that's ridiculous.
I mean, the best games and the best opponents happen at noon. Joe Klatt knows that.
I think that adding a second game to your run to a championship is, like,
awful.
So difficult, especially because there are no bad teams this time. Like, every team is good to one extent or another, and every team could beat any other team at this point. And, like, if you're the Big Ten champions, that means you could beat anyone, anytime, anywhere. And for whatever reason, people are just now realizing that there is a bit, in terms of who you play and in terms of whether or not they are because let's face it, this is all about avoiding teams that are in the Big Ten, in the SEC, or Notre Dame. And Penn State doesn't do that, so automatically it has to be easy. I fundamentally disagree with that because I think SMU is a really good football team. Bill Connolly in his latest SP Plus rankings had Penn State at number 9 and had SMU at number 12. Penn State's going to be about a 5.5 point favorite in his metric. It opened at Penn State by 8 or 8.5 and has jumped up to Penn State by 9 in Vegas, but SP Plus thinks this is going to be a pretty close game. If not for the fact that we just saw Penn State play Oregon and what Oregon was able to do to them with speed, with athletes, with scheme, with those sorts of things, I wouldn't be as concerned. But I think that SMU are going to try to take a lot of pages out of Oregon's playbook.
Brett Lashley, you will
Kevin
too.
Jennings
He's a good coach. He coached with Manning. So did James Franklin. It's a Manning. You tweeted that out about Manning Diaz, I think. Yeah.
Yes, he was Manny Diaz's offensive coordinator at Miami, right before Manny got fired and Manny came up to Penn State. But Kevin Jennings, a really good, really explosive quarterback. Rashard Smith, their running back, one of the best in the nation. Don't really have a wide receiver one, but they spread the ball around a ton. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys have caught at least 20 passes, and an eighth has caught 19. On the year.
That tight end is pretty good.
I think. Yeah, they have 2 tight ends, RJ Maryland and Matthew
Maryland's
Hibbner.
the guy I'm thinking of. He's pretty good.
Yeah, both of them have caught 4 touchdowns of the year. Both of them have actually. It's very funny. Maryland 24 catches, 15 yards per attempt, yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. Hibbner 22 receptions, 15 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns. So, very similar guys there. The thing that makes this so interesting to me is that the whole Penn State doesn't lose when they're a favorite team means that the other team needs to play a pretty clean and pretty careful and pretty close game if they are going to beat Penn State. And SMU is tied for 101st nationally with 1.7 giveaways, so interceptions and fumbles given to the other team per game. They are 130th nationally in penalties per game at 8.4 and 133rd out of 134 teams nationally in penalty yards given up per game at 81.8, which I think Nick Singleton averages 90 yards a game all purpose. So between receiving and rushing. So they basically, if they are unable to do the stuff that gets out of their own way, they're going to have a really tough time, I think, in Beaver Stadium against the Penn State team that is licking his wounds a bit, but the offense is going to be coming in playing with a bit of confidence. The defense is going to be coming in wanting to prove something. I don't think SMU are going to spread them out to the extent that Oregon did, just because I don't know if they have the guys to do that, but they have really fast, really quick, really dangerous guys in their receiver room. They have a defense that kind of makes up for the fact that, again, they're not the most talented group by just playing really aggressively and trying to get after you, forcing you to throw the ball. They are one of the best run stuffing defenses in America.
They are,
so yeah, it's going to be a really interesting matchup. We have a week and a half to come up with ideas, Matt. I think it's going to win this game, but I think everyone talking about how easy Penn State's path is being real dismissive of how good this is.
I mean, it's helmet scouting. Let's be honest, but people view the game, college game especially, through helmets. SMU's no pushover, dude. Penn State has to be ready or they're going to get got, and it's going to be insufferable if they get got. So we will. I don't think we'll do any other pods yet this week, but we'll be back next week with an SMU preview. After you and I, Bill, I think both do a pretty good deep dive this weekend on really what this Mustangs team can do. I'm excited. I'm excited to go to this game. This will be fun.
I wish I could make it.
I haven't been to a Beaver State. Actually, that's not true. It's pretty recently, since Delaware last year. But before that, it was a while.
Yeah. I am very interested in SMU having to travel up to Beaver Stadium for this. And I'm more importantly, I'm very interested in them traveling up to Beaver Stadium, and also just Penn State's been waiting for this opportunity since the concept of the
Mhm.
playoff became a thing, and like I just don't think James Franklin's going to let them
No.
slip. But we'll get
Have
to
I
that.
told the frozen
We'll
pipe
get to that a little
story
bit
at Beaver
later.
Stadium on this podcast? I think I've told the story a couple of times about the frozen pipes at Beaver Stadium.
Remind me.
When I was
Remind me.
2018, Penn State, Maryland, I want to say. It was the last game of the year after Thanksgiving, and it was a freezing cold game. And the Beaver Stadium press box, which I believe is now being torn down, um, just had like 2 bathrooms, and the pipes froze in the press box bathroom. So if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go out onto the concourse. And at halftime, they always hold the elevator for the coaches because the coaches box is right above the press box. So a couple of people braved the scaffolding of Beaver Stadium to go to the concourse to go to the bathroom because the press box bathroom pipes froze. And then the Penn State staff gave us Dunkin' gift cards, which was very nice of them. So shout out to the, I think maybe if any of them listen, thank you again for my Dunkin' gift card 6 years ago. I appreciate it.
What's other than Penn State? What's the first round playoff game you're the most excited
Indiana Notre
about?
Dame. Indiana Notre Dame 100%.
Interesting.
Indiana
Okay.
basketball, Indiana alums who are Notre Dame football fans, similar to my disdain for Penn State alums who are Villanova basketball fans. I think IU football can really do something hilarious here.
Yeah, I'm locked for very obvious reasons. Then a reason you and I have discussed that I'm not going to say on here, Matt. Ohio State, Tennessee. Like I think that game is going. I think it's very possible that Ohio State runs them off the field entirely. But I know that if Tennessee takes a lead at any point in this game, you know, I'm a couple miles from the shoe. My apartment's a couple miles from the shoe where I'll be watching this game. I'm going to be able to feel the anxiety from that building from where I am sitting several miles away. Like it's going to be a very fun couple of games. Like I love how this bracket has all broken down just as like a college football fan. And kind of on that note, Matt, what are your thoughts on seemingly every SEC person pissing their pants the exact same way over the last however?
I mean, listen, should 9-3 Alabama have got in? That's a big question. And I think the same question has to be posed is that like, yeah, it's Vanderbilt. I get it. And like, but Vandy just really had a tough time with Christian Veilleux and those Georgia State Panthers. So like, I get it. It's an SEC strength of schedule. At the same time, you're Alabama, win more than 9 games. Figure it out. Don't lose to Vanderbilt. Don't put up 3 points at Oklahoma. Don't lose to Tennessee. Boo-hoo the SEC. Also, after Bama unfairly, I think, got in last year, I think the committee got it right this time. The SEC's stranglehold as the top conference in America is slipping. I think the whole conference, which is best discussion, is kind of lame. Who cares? They're teams, not conferences. Conference pride is a scam. But it's very funny that the SEC people are mad.
Yeah, my entire thing is that one, I mean, just as like a bitter Penn State fan, I do not remember a single goddamn person making the argument that when you look at how many future NFL draft picks are on a team's roster, like that should be something that matters in this. Because if people made that argument, Penn State would have been in 2017. Like Penn State would have deserved to have made it in 2017. But the bigger thing is that like the SEC had as much say in putting this entire system together as anyone. There are like 4 entities, or basically 3 entities, the Big Ten, the SEC, and ESPN, that had the most say in what this was going to look like. And this is what everybody agreed on for that. This is what like the SEC, the Big Ten, and all these other entities agreed on when they were putting the 12-team playoff together. And obviously we're going to move to a 16-team playoff at some point. Like the worst thing that can happen if you don't want further expansion, like you should be rooting against Penn State. You should be rooting against your own self-interest, because if Penn State goes out there and dog walks SMU and then Boise, we're going to be moving to 16 teams as soon as humanly possible, which we're probably going to do anyway. But what they are also like, the argument that they are making about non-conference scheduling is such blatant bullshit that I am embarrassed as a football fan that I like a sport where people this embarrassing are being this embarrassing. Like, it is ridiculous. This is the system that they put together. They are arguing at the end of the day that because we are the SEC, we deserve things that nobody else gets. Alabama in Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and Mercer in their non-con. They went 4-0. That was not the problem here. And every single person who makes this argument about the SEC not scheduling big games out of conference knows that this is the case. It is total nonsense. It is them jingling keys over here and hope with their left hand and hoping you miss what they're doing with their right hand. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't want to say like I'm offended or anything like that as a football fan, but I think what they are doing is despicable. Like, it is just straight up despicable that this is where we are in college football, that teams are complaining to this extent about what it, like, why they don't, or conferences are complaining to this extent about what's going on. Like, Tennessee scheduled and beat NC State. Texas scheduled, went to Ann Arbor and kicked the hell out of Michigan. Georgia dog walked Clemson and then played Georgia Tech in one of the games of the year. They all won those games. There are SEC teams that are scheduling and winning and looking good in non-conference games. That is not the problem. The problem is that they clearly believe that because the SEC has better players or better teams or a better lower and middle class than any other conference, they deserve special privileges. And that is just nonsense.
It is.
I've been spending the last few days just getting absolutely riled up whenever I see this stuff. Cause like, I think it is unfair to football fans to insult their intelligence by saying, well, maybe Alabama shouldn't schedule South Florida going forward. Isn't that something that you don't want? Like, go to hell, dude. This is ridiculous.
All right, Bill, I got a hard out, but if you want, I will leave the room open and you can just keep on going off because I can tell you're really passionate about this.
I could. I could, but I'm not going to do that. I'll wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, as always, for listening to this edition of the podcast. As always, make sure that you subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. You leave us a review, leave us 5 stars, whatever you want to leave. Please go and do that. There, head over to YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, hop into the comments and talk about football. Penn State fans there. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Blue Sky. And of course, thank you again to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring the podcast. You can use that promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of the pod. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Penn State basketball, Rutgers tonight when this is coming out. We got a shot to be ranked, folks.